Hello and welcome back to Inside the Helmet. I'm your host, Michael, and this is episode 3. To kick things off today, I want to go ahead and go over my predictions from last week and see what I got right, what I got wrong, and what my overall record is predictions wise. So, first off, um, just as I think we all thought, the Bills were able to take care of business against the Miami Dolphins. It was a little closer. The Dolphins probably played their best game of the season so far. There was talk earlier in the week about them having a players only meeting, which is not a very good thing to hear if you're a coach, but it seems to have worked, which also probably doesn't say very good things about Mike McDaniel. Um, but still, the Bills, obviously one of, if not the best team in the NFL at the moment, so they were able to take care of business. No surprise there. As well, the Buccaneers were able to take care of business against the New York Jets. Again, the Buccaneers looking absolutely red hot. Even though it was close, they were still able to pull out the victory. The Commanders, even though I believe at the time I made this prediction, I think it was last Tuesday when that episode came out. I don't think we had heard about Jaden Daniels, or at least I made this prediction not knowing that Jaden Daniels was not going to be playing against the Raiders. And so I picked the Commanders to win. Thankfully, they were playing the Raiders, and so I ended up being right anyway, and they ended up blowing them out. Next, the Texans did end up falling to the Jacksonville Jaguars. That was one I got wrong. Unfortunately, the Texans not really able to find their footing early on in the season, but they get a matchup against the Titans, who are also having plenty of problems of their own. So we'll get into that in a little bit when we get into my predictions for this week. The Eagles, by the absolute skin of their teeth, able to scrape a win against the Rams. The Rams honestly looked like the better team all day against Philadelphia. I was really hoping to be proven wrong here, but the Eagles just still finding a way to win on a blocked punt return touchdown. Of all things, what a day for defensive special teams. So many blocked kicks. It was insane on Sunday. Um, Moving on, the Colts, of course, able to beat the Titans rather handily. The Titans, one of those teams, kind of like the Dolphins and the Saints and whatnot, looking like potential number one overall pick contenders. So no surprise there. Then we get into a few that I got wrong. Um, the Bengals, I predicted Jake Browning to be able to lead the Bengals despite no Joe Burrow over the Vikings. I think this may have also been before we knew that Carson Wentz was going to be playing, so I was kind of playing into the whole J.J. McCarthy not looking very good against the Falcons deal. But oh boy, Carson Wentz decided to turn back the clock and make it look like it was 2017 all over again, minus the getting hurt part. Um, Yeah, the Vikings absolutely walked all over the Bengals at home. So that was not something I saw coming. Um, Next, again, what I didn't see coming were the Browns being able to eke out a low scoring win over the Green Bay Packers, the undefeated Packers, who still, by the way, have not trailed for even a second of game time, yet they are not undefeated this season. It's very, very unfortunate. And then the Falcons coming off their win against the Vikings, playing the lowly Panthers. I expected them to be able to take care of business, even though I'm not really that high on the Falcons at all, or Michael Penix. Um, I was proven very wrong. The Panthers absolutely walked all over the Atlanta Falcons. and Michael Penix still has not won a football game in the NFL where his defense has given up more than 7 points. Just an interesting stat for you there. Next, the Steelers were able to beat the Patriots just as I expected. As well, the Seahawks looking mighty over the lowly New Orleans Saints, being able to get the win there. Then I actually predicted somewhat of an upset, kind of, with the Broncos beating the Chargers. And this was actually a very close game. It taking a Cameron Dicker, Texas Longhorn legend, by the way, Hookem. It's Cameron Dicker, who actually recently became through his first 100 field goal attempts, the most accurate kicker in NFL history, making 94 of them, which is absolutely insane. Um, but yeah, the Chargers able to win on a walk-off field goal to win it 23-20. That was a really interesting game. Um, I don't even want to talk about this one, but the Cowboys, obviously I picked my Cowboys over the Chicago Bears. You know, the Bears just looking not very impressive offensively. But I seem to have forget that our defense, for as unimpressive and lackluster as the Bears look offensively this season, our defense looks about 100 times worse. And we allowed Caleb Williams to have literally the best game of his young career so far against us. And offensively, we couldn't get anything going. We lost CeeDee Lamb to injury now with a high ankle sprain or whatever. He's going to be out for like a month. And I'll get more onto the Cowboys later. That's another thing I kind of want to do with this podcast is go more in specifics because I do want to stay objective in some aspects and just talk about sports as a whole and analyze and do all that good stuff. I want to get into that as time goes on and whatnot. But at the end of the day, I am a Cowboys fan. I'm a Texas Longhorns fan. I'm a fan of Max Verstappen, not even so much a fan of Red Bull Racing, but I'm certainly a Max fan. And so I have my allegiances, and so there will be times where I kind of want to focus more on that aspect, and appeal to those of you who maybe are interested in that as well. Because of course, me being fans of them, that's where the most extreme limits of my interest and investment and care lie. You know, and so that's going to be what I, you know, have the most interest in diving deeper into. We'll get into the Cowboys because I have so many concerns with them this season. Moving on though, getting through the rest of my predictions. I was correctly able to predict that Mac Jones would have another good enough game to get the 49ers, who also, holy cow, so many injuries going around. Um, Nick Bosa believed to have torn his ACL against the Cardinals, so the 49ers will be without him for the remainder of the season, putting a big dampen on their playoff hopes and beyond. Very unfortunate to see a guy as talented as him go down. Regardless, the 49ers were able to eke out a close win against the Arizona Cardinals, division opponent. And then on Sunday night, the Chiefs did handle the Giants. It did look very slow in the first half, but the Chiefs were able to pick it up, score a couple touchdowns. And actually, today, as I'm recording this a little bit earlier today, Jackson Dart was named the starting quarterback for the New York Giants going forward for the time being. So we're finally going to get to see. Of course, we've seen him in limited action, getting put in the game here and there for some design plays and whatnot, but we're going to get to see the Jackson Dart show full time at least for a week, probably more than just a week going forward, as the Giants try and claw their way out of an 0-3 hole. I don't know how good they'll be able to do at that, but no shame, I guess, in falling to the now 1-2, surprisingly, Kansas City Chiefs. Um, that brings us to my final prediction for last week. I predicted the Ravens to beat the Lions on Monday Night Football, and that very much was not the case. It was looking like a very, very, very close competitive game back and forth until it wasn't. Late in the fourth quarter, when the Ravens were trying to go and make something happen, while they were losing a close game, and Derrick Henry gets the ball punched out beautifully, might I add, by Aiden Hutchinson. And the Lions were able to recover, go score a touchdown, and that basically put the game away. So very unfortunate for the Ravens how that happened. Now 2 games that they've lost largely because of a Derrick Henry fumble. So very, very crazy for that to happen multiple times already in such a short season so far, to such a great and talented and storied player like Derrick Henry. But with that, this week, so after last week, my predictions, of course, because I didn't do predictions for week 1 because I hadn't started the podcast yet. But after last week, my prediction record was 12-4. This week, I believe we went 9-7, and so that brings me to a total of 21-11. Certainly not as ideal, but hopefully the predictions I'm about to give will prove to increase that record. Also, one thing I'm going to add every week is for the NFL predictions is a lock and an upset. I'm going to try and make one of my predictions be an upset. Of course, that being where the team that isn't expected to win ends up winning. Because I don't want to just predict, oh, the betting favorite's going to win every time, because that's not how it works, and that's not fun. And also, a lock is like my most confident pick of like, okay, yeah, this is the one I feel the most strongly about. And we may get to a point where if I correctly get the upset right, then maybe I'll get some bonus points. And if I get the lock wrong somehow, then like if my lock ends up being incorrect, prediction wise, maybe I have to face some sort of punishment. But we'll cross that as we go along. Anyway, getting into it, we get the Seahawks versus the Cardinals. I'm predicting the Seattle Seahawks to win. They were able to, of course, have a monster game against the New Orleans Saints. I understand the Saints are not really all that threatening of an opponent this year, but still, regardless, it's kind of hard to pick against a team that put up that kind of game against an NFL opponent last week. So I had the Seahawks winning. Also, the Cardinals just don't really impress me all that much. They kind of feel very meh, if that makes sense. I feel like they're not like the worst team in the league or anything. They still have Kyler Murray. They still have Martin Harrison Jr., who isn't really doing anything, honestly. Um, Plus, they also lost James Conner, I believe, to an injury that's they're going to be without him for some time. I believe. I'm not remembering the specifics of the injury entirely. Regardless, Seahawks over the Cardinals. Moving on, at first I actually had the Vikings beating the Steelers, but I thought about it a little more, and I thought, no, the Vikings have looked incredibly inconsistent all season so far. Of course, I just mentioned, oh, it's hard to pick against a team that put up a monster game against an NFL opponent. Well, that's what I'm doing, because the Vikings, of course, had a great game against a Joe Burrow-less, basically defenseless Bengals team, honestly, um, last week. But I don't know. I feel like if any team is going to prove that that was a fluke, maybe not a fluke, but that they can't really maintain that level of consistency, I feel like it's going to be the Vikings. And I feel like they're going to be one of those up and down teams. It's impossible to predict. Like, oh, one week they could beat a team by 50, and then another game they could, lose to an even worse opponent than the one they just beat. So I had the Steelers actually winning against the Vikings, also in part due to the fact that Aaron Rodgers, of course, during his long tenure with the Packers, played the Vikings a lot. And so I feel like he's just got that about him versus all NFC North opponents that he knows how to play them. So I have the Steelers over the Vikings. They just also feel like the more consistent team. They kind of feel like the anti Vikings in a way. And I feel like that consistency is just going to pay off. Next, I have the Commanders over the Falcons. I have no idea if Jaden Daniels is going to be back or not, but if Marcus Mariota can lead the Commanders to the kind of production he did last week against the Falcons, if it ends up being Mariota that plays, um, I think the Commanders are going to be just fine. I know they had that one stinker game a couple weeks ago with Jaden Daniels, but I don't think that's going to be a long term thing. The Commanders look like they're on the up in terms of the NFL hierarchy. I'm saying upstart feels weird for an NFL franchise that's been in existence for a very long time, of course, but I don't know. They just feel like one of those young teams that just has that fire in them. And so I think they are going to beat the Falcons. The Falcons, in a way, feel kind of similar but different to the Commanders. Like they have a similar concept, of course, with their pretty young core, of players. And Michael Penix, of course, I know he got benched at the end of the game against the Panthers for Kirk Cousins. I don't know if they're going to start Kirk going forward or if they're going to put Penix back in next week. But then they have Bijan and Drake London and that young core, but it feels kind of flat. It's like the inverse of the Commanders, who have a young, exciting, fiery core. The Falcons kind of just feel bleh, if that makes sense. It makes sense to me. Moving on, the Chargers, of course, coming off. Uh, I think this is their first 3-0 start since Drew Brees was their starting quarterback, which is insane. It's like 20 years ago almost. If not more actually. Versus the 0-3 Giants, I think this is a pretty easy one. It's not my lock. We'll get to my lock here in a little bit. Um, but I have the Chargers over the Giants. Next, the battle of the 0-3s. In the AFC South, the Texans and the Titans. I just don't have any hope for the Titans. I don't have a whole lot of hope for the Texans, which I like CJ Stroud. I also like Cam Ward, so it's kind of depressing that neither of them are really having great production. Um, but I have slightly less hope for the Titans, and so I have the Texans winning this one, although I don't think it's going to be a very good game. Sometimes you get those games versus two bad opponents, and they're both so bad it cancels each other out, and it ends up being a good game because they're pretty evenly matched. I don't think this is going to be a very good, very exciting game. I could see this being a very low scoring game. The Texans maybe win like 14-10 or something like that. Um, Anyway, next up, what I think is going to be a much better game, I have the Buccaneers upsetting the Philadelphia Eagles. I don't really know how much of an upset this is, considering they're both 3-0, but I feel like the Buccaneers are a more surprising 3-0. They kind of have that underdog, chippy mentality, kind of like the Lions have had the past few years, except now they're kind of expected to be good now that they've had some sustained success the past few years. The Buccaneers kind of feel like in a similar boat just earlier on in the journey. Um, whereas the Eagles, of course, everyone expects them to be very good, defending Super Bowl champions and all. But I have the Buccaneers over the Eagles. I just feel like Baker Mayfield's going to have a great game that day, and yeah, we're going to see the Eagles fall for the first time this season, especially after they had such a close call against the Rams. I feel like the Buccaneers are just going to be able to capitalize a little bit better at the end of the game and not allow that comeback. So that is my official upset for this week. Next up, kind of another game between two not all that exciting teams, the Patriots and Panthers. I have the Patriots winning this one. I know the Panthers, kind of like what I said regarding the Vikings and the Seahawks about it being hard to pick against a team that just had a good game. Um, yeah, I'm doing it again here. The Panthers just they don't scare me. They don't inspire me. I know they beat the Falcons and all that, but the Falcons don't impress me either. So um, I feel like the Patriots coming off, I believe, lost to the Steelers. Yeah. Um, I just feel like they are a little bit more well put together team, and so I think they're going to get the job done against the lowly Panthers. I do believe the Panthers are that kind of team that can strike, catch lightning in a bottle once in a while. And I feel like they had that moment last week, and so this week they're gonna come out absolutely dead, and they're not gonna get anything good done. So give me the Patriots. Next, we have my lock for this week. I'm locking in the Bills are going to beat the Saints. There are no two ways about it. The Bills are the team I have the absolute most confidence in. Um, as things go right now, the Bills are my early pick to win the Super Bowl without a doubt. Um, and Josh Allen is my pick to be MVP once this season is over and done. So give me the Bills over the Saints. That one should be a pretty obvious pick. In a similar way, even though the Browns are coming off a win over the formerly undefeated Packers, give me the Lions. The Lions just put up a very impressive performance against the good and talented Ravens, and so I like them over the Cleveland Browns. Uh, as well, give me the 49ers over the Jaguars. Um, I could honestly see the Jaguars pulling an upset here. I just don't think they're going to do it. I think the 49ers, despite their injuries, have a better roster. They have better coaching. And the Jaguars are the Jaguars. They're just a losing franchise. So I feel like this one's going to be all 49ers. Next, a game I can see being very good and honestly going either way. I have the Colts beating the Rams. Um, However, of course, the Rams just narrowly lost to the Eagles, so I could very well see them being on the up trajectory this season, and doing very well. They look good. Um, but I just don't think I can pick against the Colts with how red hot they've been. And Daniel Jones just looking like a genuine MVP candidate. So I'm still gonna go with the Colts until they prove me otherwise. Um, yeah, just a few more left. I've got the Bears over the Raiders. The Raiders, another one of those teams that just don't look very good. And so I have the Bears being able to take care of business. Then I have the Ravens over the Chiefs. Of course, the Chiefs um, picking up their first win against the lowly Giants um, this past weekend, and the Ravens falling to the very mighty Lions. it feels weird to say Mighty Lions. Of course, they lost a good game last night. And both teams are 1-2, but I just feel like the Ravens are the more complete team. The Chiefs have still just had too many inconsistencies, especially on offense, with the injuries they have. And so I like the Ravens to get the job done against the Chiefs. Then it pains me to do this. I hate to do this, but I'm gonna have to pick the Packers to beat the Dallas Cowboys. I had to kind of sputter it out. It hurts that bad to say it. I don't want to pick against the Cowboys ever. I want to believe that we'll right the ship. We'll go 15-2. We'll win the Super Bowl. I don't think it's going to happen. We lost CB. We have too many defensive injuries. I'll get a little bit more into that in a minute once we're done with the predictions. But the Packers are going to be very angry coming off their loss to the Browns. And we already saw a couple of years ago in the playoffs Jordan Love against the Cowboys, and so I I'm not looking forward to this game at all as a Cowboys fan. Closing out the predictions though, um, Jets against Dolphins. This is just not going to be a very good game. I think Jets will do enough to win. If they play how they play against the Steelers, they'll do just fine against the Dolphins. The Dolphins don't worry me at all. I think they might just be the worst team in the league. Maybe not even skill wise, but coaching wise, I think they're the worst team in the league. So it's very hard to pick in their favor at all this season so far. And to close it out, I have the Broncos beating the Bengals. The Broncos, of course, still looking very strong defensively, just narrowly falling to the 3-0 Chargers. And so the Bengals, with the injuries they have and whatnot, it's kind of hard to pick in their favor right now. They just look flat. They look powerless right now without Joe Burrow. There are just too many things wrong with that team to have much confidence in them, unfortunately. Because I like the Bengals. I like Joe Burrow. It's sad to see him go down. But I think the Broncos just have a good roster. And they're gonna. It could be close. I could honestly see it be close. Jake Browning is able to, pull some magic out every once in a while. But I don't think it'll be enough. Um, yeah, that is all for the predictions. Next, I want to go a little bit more in depth about the Dallas Cowboys specifically. Like I mentioned, that is my team. Being from Texas, it's been my team my whole life, and whatnot. I was raised on Cowboys doctrine, learning about the Doomsday defense, learning about Roger Staubach, who's actually my favorite player of all time, even though he retired from the NFL, 35 years before I was born, more or less. Um, Maybe 34 years, whatever. Um, Regardless, I was raised on enough highlights and enough stories from my dad that he's far and away my favorite player of all time. Regardless, point being, I'm a Cowboys fan, and so when I think of football, I'm going to think of the Cowboys. And right now, when I think of the Cowboys, I feel a great, deep internal pain thinking about this team and all the injuries and all the struggles and all the hair pulling, teeth gritting moments that they're causing right now. Of course, everyone knows it all started with the when we let Micah Parsons leave us, for Green Bay of all teams. We get our reunion, our bittersweet reunion. Jerry Jones came out and said today or yesterday that The Cowboys won't be having some tribute play before the game or anything to honor Micah Parsons, and I've seen mixed reactions about it. But where I lie on that is actually yeah, why would we? It's not like he you know, had 20 sacks a year. It's not like he won a Super Bowl or anything or won Defensive Player of the Year. Yeah, he was a very key, very instrumental player in our defense and whatnot for a few years, but he in no way cemented himself as a Cowboy legend. I think obviously everyone was really sad to see him go and angry that we let him go because we recognize the talent and the potential. But in a way, it's honestly been a little underwhelming. I feel like the story of Micah Parsons in Dallas is kind of a lot of what if. Of course he's showing out in Green Bay now because of course he is. Why wouldn't he just, turn it up a notch as soon as he leaves? Um, that's just the way things go sometimes. Regardless, I think a lot of our struggles, of course, with all our injuries on both sides of the ball, losing CeeDee Lamb to, I believe it was an ankle sprain. He's going to be out for a few weeks. And then, of course, all our injuries on defense, especially in our secondary, and our just non-existent pass rush, even when it's healthy. Um, I believe a lot of it comes down to coaching. I believe there are times when our play calling on offense is just flat. It's just lackluster. We lack the means of attaining that momentum, getting the ball going. I feel like everything's just happening at the wrong time. We're trying to set up the wrong thing at the wrong time. We're trying to run the ball when we should be taking deep shots. We're coming out of the gate taking deep shots when we should be trying to establish the run, get the opponent to have their DBs creep forward. Then we can hit them over the top. Just too much of the wrong thing at the wrong time, and that's just offensively. That doesn't even take into account all the just mental mistakes, all the missed assignments, all the drops and whatnot. I think Dak has thrown 3 interceptions all season, and you can make a very strong argument that none of them have been his fault. Of course, the one against the Giants, um, one against the Giants, the replay very clearly showed the ball hit the ground. He didn't catch it. And then I believe he had 2 against the Bears that, neither of them were really his fault either. They're either bouncing off of someone's hands or, he had to force something when it was late in the game and didn't really have any other options. So, just really unfortunate that those all are going to count against him on the stat sheet when really he didn't have much he could do about it. Um, and then for some reason, we thought that it would be a good idea to bring in Matt Eberflus, of course, the guy who couldn't really win anything with Caleb Williams as his quarterback, and we decided, yeah, let's bring him in and have him run our defense. Yeah, that's a great idea. Psh, no, no, he needs to be fired, and that's all I really have to say about that right now. It's just a lot of just deflated hope, deflated emotions. I felt so good after week 1 against the Eagles. I felt so hopeful. And I feel like just this past week, all that hope has been extracted forcefully from my person. And so that's also kind of why I picked against the Cowboys, despite my bias, despite the fact that I, of course, will always be rooting for them. It just seems that this season is a lost cause already. It feels a lot like a 2020 or a 2015 or something like that. Um, what is it? Why is it every 5 years the Cowboys just have a stinker of a year? I don't get it. And that's all I have to say about that. Um, moving on now. Now that we've talked about football and the NFL for half an hour, let's talk about F1 because we actually had a race this weekend, of course, in Baku. And I had my own little set of predictions for that race. I don't really take my F1 predictions as seriously or intensely as I do my NFL predictions, or at least I didn't at that time. But I believe I predicted a top three consisting of Oscar Piastri winning the race, followed by some combination of Max and Lando joining him on the podium in second and third in either order. And boy, was I wrong. The only thing I got right was that Max would be on the podium. I did not account for Oscar Piastri having an absolute disaster of a weekend. You know, of course, crashing in a qualifying session that had six red flags. Of course, I'm sure y'all have seen if you are interested in Formula One at all. But the six red flags that were waved in qualifying this past weekend were the most in any qualifying session ever in F1 history, which is absolutely insane. Um, but of course, Oscar crashing in Q3, having to start ninth, was it? Regardless, starting in the middle of the pack, and then he jumps the start already. He didn't just jump the start and then just keep going like so many people do. He jumped the start on accident and then stopped. Like, oh shoot, I shouldn't have done that kind of reaction. And that caused him to drop down near last. And then he crashes. He crashes like 30 seconds into the race, well, which is absolutely insane. And we get the safety car coming out, and then we get going back after Max has an absolutely beautiful safety car restart, catching Carlos right where he didn't want to be caught, and then running away with it into the distance. So Max ended up winning. He pulls now 69 points behind Oscar, of course, when only a couple races ago he was over 100 points behind. So he is closing in rapidly now. Do I think that McLaren and specifically Oscar are going to have such a disastrous weekend every weekend? No, I don't. I think it would be very unrealistic to think that they're going to be so consistent, so otherworldly consistent to the point where you think that they've made a deal with some higher power for engine reliability. Um, and then suddenly everything comes crashing down towards the very end. I don't think so. I think they've just had a few iffy and bad, in some cases, moments recently, but I think that they will right the ship. Um, I am still hopeful, though. Maybe some call it delusion, but I say it's only delusional if it ends up being wrong. But I am fully believing now in Max for the championship. Not that I ever really lost hope, of course, because he never was at any point mathematically eliminated. Um, but he is just on an absolutely unreal run of form right now. You know, something that in my short time being a fan of F1, only really getting into it just before the 2024 season. So I didn't even get to witness 2022 or 2023 or even 2021. Any of Max's first three championships. I didn't get to witness any of that firsthand. Um, but these two past weekends from Max are some of the most impressive things I've ever seen in any sport whatsoever. And so I have no reason to believe if anyone can do it, it's the Dutchman. So I am now a full believer that Max is just somehow going to pull this off. I can see the writing on the wall, and that's my full on prediction. That being said, even though I believe that it's going to happen, I do recognize the absolute absurdity of things that would have to go in Max's favor. He basically needs to win everything. Um, and then Oscar and Lando need to continue taking points off of one another, coming second and third, because if Oscar were to come second in every single race and sprint for the rest of the season, Max would still not be able to catch up, even if he won everything. Um, just because of the gap Oscar still has to Max in points. But I do still believe, Lando isn't going to give up on this title. Everyone's talking about Max, but Lando is only 25 or so points behind Oscar. He still firmly is believing he can, win this championship, even if he didn't do the best job of, climbing back some of that gap when Oscar was out. He didn't really capitalize on it, but there's still time. And Singapore was a race Lando absolutely dominated last year, and so I think Lando's coming into this race thinking, "Oh, this is my race to lose." I did so well here last year, and Max has never won here. So that being said, I just think Max is going to do it. We've seen him win 10 in a row before. I have no reason to believe he can't win out. And so I think the McLarens are just going to keep taking points off one another, and it's going to end up being a 2007 situation where Kimi Raikkonen ended up winning over the two McLarens because there was so much infighting and whatnot. So I could see it very well going a similar way. Um, but yeah, that's my little bit I had to say about F1. I guess if you want an official prediction, I think Max is going to win in Singapore. Followed by Lando, followed by Oscar. I am still going with the Max and then two McLarens podium. I think Lando's going to get the edge just based off of how well he did last year over Oscar. Um, but yeah, that is how I think that is going to go, and we will see in about a week and a half or 2 weeks if I am correct. But with that, that's about all I got for today. And so I want to thank you guys for tuning into the show. This has been Inside the Helmet. I have been your host, Michael, and I will catch you guys next time. Be sure to, oh yeah, one more thing. Inside the Helmet is now on YouTube. If you want to look me up, it's just the same. Inside the Helmet is the name. You'll recognize it by the logo and whatnot. But if you are preferring to consume your podcasts on YouTube, I am on there now as well. So be sure to go and like and subscribe and download on Spotify, all the good things. Leave me any comments for anything you might want to hear me talk about. Or just any ways that you think I can make this show a little bit better. I'm always open to those types of suggestions. Also, follow the Inside the Helmet podcast on Instagram if you would feel so inclined. And with that, I want to thank you guys for tuning in. I'll see you guys next time.